All right, we are moving along with quizzes, so I am very glad that you are here. Something that we do uniquely here at Prep, so this is actually an add-on item in your Canvas, is that we use an external tool called LockDown Browser. Now, you will have read in your new Canvas page all the advantages of using LockDown Browser. So the whole purpose of doing this video is to show you how to take a quiz you have already created. So the quiz is done and it's ready to go using all that stuff we already talked about, and how to put that into LockDown Browser. Okay, so let's jump right into it here. I am in my sandbox course. So you can see I'm in my sandbox. And I want to show you the difference between a couple different quizzes that I have here. So let's just take these two and I'm just going to move them closer to each other. So we know these are both quizzes because you can look and see here they have the rocket icon. But do you see how this second one here has this dash and then says requires Respondus LockDown Browser? So I've taken the extra step already with this quiz to put it into LockDown Browser. However, this first one does not have that add-on text, so it is not in the Respondus LockDown Browser. Every single quiz I give students in Canvas is requiring the Respondus LockDown Browser. Now, there may be instances where you don't. Maybe it is an open note quiz and you want them to be able to use another resource. That said, unless you literally are giving them carte blanche on what they can use, you want to use Respondus LockDown Browser, because even within LockDown Browser, you can say allow them access to Google Docs. So they're in the LockDown Browser, and the one thing they can go out and do is they can access Google Docs, or they can access a specific website or something like that. For the most part, and speaking personally, talk to your mentor within your department and your subject specific area. There may be different ways that you're using the LockDown Browser, but I can say, for example, in the history department for me, I use it pretty much locked down. I don't usually allow them to go out and use external sources, but I can see there being reasons you might want to. So just want to throw that caveat out there. All right, so things that we want to talk about doing is, how do I take my existing quiz and get it set up for LockDown Browser? What are the specific settings that I might want to do, and how do I kind of double check that it's in the LockDown Browser mode? And then I'm not going to show you how students will access a quiz using LockDown Browser, but the resource that I linked in your Canvas page has that information for you, okay? All right, so let's take this quiz that I do not have in the LockDown Browser, and let's get it into LockDown Browser. Now, I'm not going to go into the quiz. Instead, I'm going to come over here into my course navigation, and you can see here's LockDown Browser. This is a teacher-specific item. So just previously, we were talking about item banks. And if you don't see it, you do have to come down to your settings. You do have to go into your navigation, and you do have to make sure that that is in the top section. It's not in the top section. Look for it down here in all these other options and make sure that you drag it and drop it up here. Okay, I do have it there, so we're gonna come back home. All right. Now that you've got LockDown Browser there, you're gonna come here and you're gonna click on LockDown Browser from the course navigation. Here are all the different quizzes that I have in this course, and you can see some of them I have set to require LockDown Browser, others I do not have set to require LockDown Browser. I think it was this quiz that we wanted to put into LockDown Browser. So how do we do that? I'm going to click on the the triangle here, and it turned green as I hovered over it, and I'm going to select my settings. And I'm going to click Require Respondus LockDown Browser for the exam. Once I click on that radial button, then I can check my advanced settings. All right. To learn more about these when you're in the moment and you're actually doing this, all you have to do is hover over this explain, and it gives you specific information. Okay. So for example, now again, in my coursework, I never check any of these. I don't want to lock students into the browser until the exam is complete. What that means is, let's say I've set a 45-minute timer for the exam, but a student finishes in 20 minutes. That student is locked into the lockdown browser until that 45-minute timer goes up. So that is not something that adds like an extra layer of protection or anything like that. It's just saying all students are locked into the exam until the timer goes off, basically. Okay. I like students, once they're done with their assessment, to be able to start working on their homework or working on a classwork assignment that I have. So I don't use that. You might find a reason to do that. This is where you can allow access to external resources. So if I want students to be able to access a web page, or if I want them to access Google Docs or Google Slides or whatever, I can do that. I would do that and then give the information that they're allowed to access here. Okay. Maybe you're in a class where you want them to be able to, I used to turn this on a lot when I was teaching economics. Usually the math and economics is basic enough they can do it without a calculator, but I would turn that on, okay? Not usually. Many instances you might want them to print from an exam, so it's rare that that gets turned on. I've never actually turned that on for a test, but that's that option. Okay, so these are all the different advanced settings that you have available to you. We do not do live proctoring in this situation. I could see maybe during COVID that was something people were using, but don't require is leave that as it is. And then all I do is save and close that. All right, just to kind of double check that, let's go find that again. Hotspots Thinkling type quiz, it now is required. And if I come back to my home page, now I see that text has been added to the name of that quiz. Now, here's a little bit of, I don't know, just a little bit of a warning, I guess, if you will. If you're ever sharing, so say I take this quiz and I want to send it to a colleague of mine that teaches the same subject and we're sharing a common assessment. When I send that to them, that will get sent with --requires Respondus LockDown Browser as a name attached to it. That does not mean it is in Lockdown Browser for that teacher. Even so seeing the name there is not always a foolproof method of knowing that quiz is in Lockdown Browser. Make sure you do the needful if it is a quiz that has been shared with you from somebody else. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Again, I created this quiz, so I know, or I created this quiz, I know, but if that's a quiz that came to me from somebody else, even if it says that, I really should come in here, go to Lockdown Browser, and double check that it is in fact required. And I've turned that setting on. Okay. So that's kind of my way to double check that. All right. So I think that's it. I mean, it's a really actually pretty easy thing from the teacher's end. Once you have the quiz created, you just have to turn it on. And then from the student perspective, I've both included a video for the student perspective in your Canvas page. I have also included a linkable file that takes you to the steps that students will go through to get the quiz into Lockdown Browser. For the most part, when it comes to students, unless it's literally like freshmen taking a quiz for the first time, all you have to say to your students is, this quiz requires a Lockdown Browser. Please make sure you go in through the Lockdown Browser. And they know what to do. All right. So don't let that stress you out, I guess, is what I'm saying as a new teacher. Again, unless you're teaching freshmen and it's the very first time they're taking it, in which case, let me know. And I'm happy to be in the classroom with you when you do that. Okay. I think that's all on the Lockdown Browser. As always, if you have any questions as you're working through this, please make sure and let me know.